And we are now recording. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the OpenJS Standards Working Group meeting on this kind of cold for me, March 7th, 2023. We start with issue number 208. That's our agenda for today on the standards repo. We are going to do a couple of things. We're going to do some closing out, hopefully, of the concise guide. We're going to talk to our TC39 delegates about just refining and better documenting our SME and delegate participation. We don't yet have any more info on OpenJS World beyond that it's happening. May 9th is so I guess I'll kind of roll this into just like general announcements. May 9th, then the 10th and the 11th are OpenJS World. The collab summits on the 9th, and the following 2 days are Open Source Summit North America. So thanks to everybody who's submitted a call for proposals to the conference. There have been a number of really good proposals, and the programming committee is working really hard to narrow that down, hopefully by the end of this week, so we can get those speaker invites out in a timely fashion. But that'll be a really good time, and we hope to see everyone there. So that's my OpenJS World announcement. Joe, do you have any news or updates from the CPC to share, or other fun stuff?
Not that I can think of, other than the fact that we have a working session after this meeting, and we're going to work on some of the code of conduct work that we've been doing, which includes like a patching script to apply our language around the contributor covenant code of conduct, as well as like figuring out what a moderation team looks like for the foundation, which is sort of an umbrella to the other projects. So there are some considerations to work through there. But yeah, that's the working session. I can't think of anything else of note beyond that.
Cool. I also don't have anything of note. I mean, there's lots of stuff happening, but nothing, it's kind of usual rhythm of business stuff. I think I shared last week that Living Spec had, or 2 weeks ago, Living Spec joined. I think that happened, just prior. So that was exciting. There's a lot of great work happening on the Alpha Omega grants for Node and jQuery, but we're blogging about that, and those are great projects that so keep in touch there if you're interested. Okay, well, if we have no more announcements, we will move on to the meat of today's meeting, which is to discuss the issue number 173 and to also hopefully wrap up 190. So 190 is the concise guide, and we have I think Leah or someone also popped this in the Zoom chat for easier access to you all. A couple of things that were adjusted from last time. Richard made the point that we should probably not just kind of restrict this concept to browsers, so that's been revised to say platforms in the opening paragraph. Leah had some very good advice that we really didn't do much to advise on creating, like, hey, you should probably test this out maybe, and so writing a reduced test case to be sure that you know what you're dealing with. I've added a paragraph to the bottom of the first point, but I think that might want to go up earlier in that paragraph. And we've added Leia's useful resources for writing reduced test cases to the bottom under additional resources. Then let's see, just some cleanup around kind of language where, let's see, there was one where we'd said, let's call this a clarification bug. yeah, just kind of reiterating, creating that test case and yeah, that's kind of where we're at. And then I think Leia's last point, which was to add links to where you can report on each platform, would be helpful. I agree. I just haven't gone and grabbed those just yet. So that is where we are in the concise guide. How are we feeling? I had hoped today that we would be ready to hopefully at least +1 this enough to put this in a directory on GitHub, and then have it where Kylie and our marketing support team can point to it or package it up and put it on the website and things like that. But thoughts? Joe's shaking his head, but then gives me a thumbs up. Mixed messages, dude.
No thoughts, thumbs
No
up.
thoughts. Okay, no thoughts, thumbs up. Okay, got it. Cool. Great. Okay. Then if we've got thumbs up, I think we probably do want to move this into, because now we're at a point where adding it to GitHub is the probably the best means to capture any broader final feedback from everyone. And so I will accept edits and resolve comments, and then I think the thing to do would be kind of start to put feedback there, and we'll talk to Kylie about when we can put it on, maybe put it on the blog or whatever, and these things can be living, right? Like that's how the OpenSSF treats it. And so if there are clarifications to language, if there are better resources, if there's better advice from folks who live and breathe this, then they can help us out and either make a comment or submit a pull request to update it there. And we'll be good. All right, cool. I like it. Okay. That feels good. That feels like having done something today, sort of. So I'll do that after this call. All right, then let's move to the updating it via PR may be better than editing. Yeah. I'm just thinking we're kind of at that point where like we want to add, we probably want to start tracking our thinking a little bit, and yeah. Okay. Then the next item is related to 173. And so we have Guy Bedford here, and also Richard and Jordan are amazing at varying points, TC39 delegates. And Guy, I think, has raised some really good questions and some good points around, the fact that we haven't done as great a job as we need to, kind of documenting expectations, documenting kind of not just for us, but also for our friends and peers who are chairpersons and editors of these standards groups that we liaise with, what it is that we're doing, how these folks come to be here, what's our deal. It's a little easier if you're a product company to say, okay, well, here's why this company is participating in this standard. But when you're a group like OpenJS, we're also a group of companies. What does this look like? We're a group of companies, but we're mostly a group of projects. We're a group of JavaScript projects. So what does this mean for us? And so that's, I think, the place from which the question comes. I'm happy to let Guy kind of you started to expand on this a little bit before we started recording, but I'll let him chime in too.
Yeah, thanks, Sherry. Yeah, I also want to apologize myself for not engaging as much in the standards process in the OpenJS Foundation as well, because I guess from my perspective, it was kind of a Node.js thing and then representing Node.js modules, but then I never kind of got a handle on how to engage at a OpenJS Foundation layer on standards related stuff. And so it feels like maybe there's some clarifications around communication. And I can just bring up some examples at the moment. You know, currently there's one spec in particular, the import assertion specification at TC39. And you know, myself and Jordan are both involved in discussion on this spec. And there's a lot of quite you know, difficult and very technical discussions that are happening around that specification. And for either of us to come up with positions, I guess it would help solidify that process if we knew. Sorry about if there's background noise. I don't know how good the cancellation is, but the garbage disposal, the garbage truck decided to come outside right now. So yeah, how we're representing the project or the foundation, and to give us a stronger footing as things get tough, I guess is really, you know, maybe would help, or how we get communication. So in this example of import assertions as well, there was a Node.js TSC meeting in which they discussed the standards questions and came to a Node.js position for the Node.js project, which they then communicated to TC39, whereas myself and Jordan were entirely cut out of that process or not part of that process. So there's some real like unclear communication situations that are coming up. And so when we speak at TC39, it's difficult to say well, you know, how we represent our projects and things like that. And just if there's ways to, even at the bare minimum, having something to point to and be like, here's the policy and here's how we represent, you know, these standards processes, that something just very simple to start with, to be able to answer those questions for me in particular would help. I'm sure Jordan has a bunch of thoughts on this topic as well.
Yeah, so regardless, having a document to point to is a good idea, and probably something, if we don't have it, we should have had it like a while ago. When we had discussions around this stuff, at least around TC39, everyone seemed to be in agreement. My recollection is that everyone seemed to be in agreement that individuals are individuals and can argue their own individual positions all they like. However, that specifically for someone who is considered a delegate of the OpenJS Foundation, any consensus they want to give or withhold, primarily withhold, is something that should be done with the consent of this group. And so, and then as far as talking about Node, if Node has taken the time to, or if any sub-project of the, you know, the foundation has taken the time to express an official position, that is a position that an OpenJS delegate is, I think, ethically bound to make sure is presented, although it probably would be anyway. I don't think that, let's say you as a delegate, I don't think you have to agree with Node's position, as long as you faithfully represented it or ensured that it has been represented. Like, personally, I feel like you're good there. Now, Joe is here as and is on the TSC for Node, so like the consensus of this group may not be achievable if it violates something the Node project wants. And I think that any project in the foundation has the opportunity to join these meetings here and participate in that consensus process. And that's the cost of joining the meetings and spending the time. You know, that's the cost, but the benefit is that you get to participate in these decisions. And there's no real gate other than participate in the meetings, as far as I know. Yeah. So that's I think that's essentially it. Is like and then the other items would be like, before a plenary meeting or before a position is expressed publicly as a delegate of the foundation, it is wise but not necessarily required to like air it with this group first and get everyone's thoughts on it, give everyone advance notice. And we discussed the likelihood of needing of having new information pop up like in a meeting and needing to respond and not wanting to have to keep silent until you go talk to this group first. And that was more or less acceptable, but like you basically have to be able to justify your decisions. If you have not cleared them in advance, you have to be able to justify them later to this group and perhaps revisit them if the group disagrees. So it's sort of like kind of a best judgment philosophy, with an erring on the side of getting of advanced circulation with this group.
I guess it's, I mean, you say it's not inhibitive for standards contributors or people coming to standards positions on projects to participate in this group, but I think that naturally will be something that will cause a difference in attendance and or difference in representation. And it is nice that we can allow projects to come to their own decisions, and that's what should be encouraged, I guess. And so how those processes meet is something that's kind of important to work out. So like maybe projects have a process where like, sure, if you want to come to a position on the standard, come to it, but document it in this way so that the people involved in standards in the OpenJS Foundation know what decisions are happening at a standards level and can be engaged in that as well. So that there's bridges or process to bridge, because I guess like in this specific case, was it Antoine? I forget how to pronounce his exact name. At 59.
Yeah, I think Antoine. He directly posted on the TC39 repo on an unrelated PR a comment stating the Node.js position, and that was before either myself or Jordan had even heard about that discussion. Well, I don't know how involved you were in that, Jordan. I mean, the issue that Node used to discuss it was publicly posted and yet locked to collaborators for some reason. The stated reason for that was to actually to exclude TC39 members, despite there being TC39 members that are Node collaborators. So I was very confused at that whole thing. It seemed to be an inappropriate restriction, but certainly the wrong place to post it if it has that restriction. And then the conversation was had, and I didn't even know the TSC had made a decision about it until Antoine made that comment. So yeah, I agree it would be nice for some clarity there, but this isn't like a constraint, right? The foundation is not built to tell Node how to do it. It's more just like, it'd be really nice if you told your parent foundation's standards group about, standards decisions, and it would be even nicer if you involved them in those discussions prior to a decision being made. But
yeah, so it's a fine line between gatekeeping and ensuring that everyone can be involved in the process, and
yeah.
But as long as those communication problems are being tackled, I think that can only help in theory. So and I mean, this is as much our own communication faults, and I think it's a really good example at the moment of the sort of things that can happen with standards engagements or more. This is a particularly contentious spec and process, and sort of quite time critical, but then also quite difficult to get consensus on. And so I don't think myself and Jordan even have the same opinion on it. I don't think I even have the same opinion as other Node.js members. So we ourselves are struggling to find a consensus. But at least if there were like a clear way in which project standards positions could be shared internally, and there was a clear understanding of what how the consensus and how the positions of delegates are maintained, or on what backing. And I think Jordan covered that initially quite well, in terms of saying we have to respect the project positions, and we can't go against that. Any kind of block should have a full some kind of process of gaining, a foundation backing, that it's not just, one delegate deciding to suddenly block a whole process of TC39, which is going to set back some standards by months.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
this goes back to like the why of why we created this group, and to y'all's point, it wasn't in fact to create some kind of bottleneck through which everybody needed to funnel, but rather a way that for us to be able to amplify, here are the activities that our different projects are engaging with, and can we connect dots for people? Can we help unblock people? Can we open up gateways for more productive conversation with the right people? Like how can we facilitate cooperation between our JavaScript developers and standards makers and browser engineers, and to solve problems. And that was the whole remit. We've focused on doing things that we find are hopefully helping to broaden participation, to educate, that kind of thing, but not to gatekeep, not to block, but to support. And so when we've had projects come in and say, or somebody from our project community come in and say, I have a proposal, what do I do? Can I, my company isn't a member of this standards organization, but this is really about my project work. Can I work with your with OpenJS to kind of represent the project point of view? And then, yeah, to your point, Guy, like the projects need to be able to demonstrate a way that they have openly and effectively, gathered consensus for that position. And it is alarming if they've gone and done that in a way that did not include all of, and is not an actually consensus opinion, because it sounds like didn't have y'all's I don't know. So that's
well, I mean, I'm
a
not a
separate-
node collaborator,
Hmm.
so I wouldn't, and I'm not on the TSC. So me personally, for example, I would have no stake in that decision. I just find it very strange that such a decision would seek to exclude any stakeholders or valuable sources of context or information, which includes me and very much includes Guy, and a number of others. So, I mean, Joe, it'd be great if this TSC could get some feedback that perhaps this was a subpar way of conducting the discussion, but like, it's Node's decision to make there, right? Like Node can decide, the TSC decides its own process.
or that that maybe Node could have let us know that they were going to conduct a discussion and and have it. I mean, sure, can be the same terms as the discussion was held under, but like giving folks a heads up that it is happening, especially here, so that we could support
maybe
it.
if it's like just a mention that should be made for standards discussions or something like that, and when there's conclusions being made on standards positions, something as simple as a rule like that. I wouldn't dwell too much on the specific the way things played out in the discussion here, I don't even know that either of us are particularly concerned about the outcome at the moment. I think it's more just process questions. I don't think I'm kind of chasing a specific outcome here myself.
Right.
Just chasing process to be able to have the ammunition at TC39, and if anything, skipping those discussions earlier is only going to backfire, because it's going to cause those concerns to come out at TC39.
And I mean, and that is, I think, a recurring theme throughout all the standards discussions I've been a part of, TC39 or otherwise, is that anytime anything is like, the sooner anything is talked about, the smoother everything will always go. Because worst case, you can get out your screaming arguments 3 months before you actually otherwise would have to have them in plenary, and that's like the worst case. In the best case, you actually come to a like better decision where you're both convinced this is the best path forward, both or all parties, right? And then like by the time you actually get to plenary, it's a very smooth discussion that's like better informed. And I've seen the same some HTML venues and in Node stuff as well. So yeah, I would love to do whatever it takes to make it easier and more encouraged for OpenJS projects to participate in this group's right now's meeting, either by filing issues or attending or whatever, but or whether that's notifying us that they're concerned about something or they want to make a decision, or whether that's seeking our advice on before they make their decision, like including our input, or whether that's asking us to convey their decision, right? Like whatever the project means, right? When wearing the hat of an OpenJS standards group member, like our goal is to like solve the problems that our projects have, all of them, right? And it doesn't matter if individually we agree with those positions or constraints or needs or not. Like our job here is to further those goals. So like,
Yeah,
I want that to happen.
I'm not on the TSC, but
Oh, my mistake.
Yeah, no worries. But I talk to those, the folks on the TSC pretty regularly. If you have a link to, I've been so busy lately with some other work stuff, I haven't caught on to this, but if you have a link to that lock discussion or anything, that would be helpful. And I'll definitely try to approach the topic with any folks I talk to. I agree with you, Jordan and Guy.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think like, as I say, there is a fine line here between gatekeeping and engaging. And I think, focusing on a way that's empowering projects to come up with their own, because we can't be in charge of all the solutions. It's about surfacing but not just then letting them go off on their own and engage with standards, but saying, okay, you're surfacing some standards discussions. You should, here's some process you can think about while you're working through standards issues. Have you discussed it with OpenJS Foundation delegate? Have you considered joining a meeting if you have something that needs further discussion or wider input and feedback on? And I guess in this case, the Node.js collaborators went to the TSC as that authority effectively. And if there was a clear path where you could go for standards authority and get a foundation position, then maybe they would have brought that discussion to these meetings, certainly. But at the same time, not making it completely mandatory. I think there's something nice about keeping things overhead where possible.
I think our concern at the end of the day is mostly that, particularly if there's a proposal or a spec or whatever that's going to have pretty broad impact on all of our communities, that we get the opportunity to just share that here's the discussion, here's what's happening. And we know that like project A may have an entirely different opinion about it than project B, and that's fine. I don't think that we would, try and enforce like one true story, but I think what we want to be able to do is have a very full picture for impact, for input, and not surprising people with new news that they maybe didn't have a chance to consume and sort of absorb and figure out, how does this impact me or my project? Can I go talk to people if I have a different opinion than the Node team? Can I go talk to them within the context of the standards working group so that we can sort of, maybe we'll end up agreeing to disagree, but at least there's that forum. So it sounds like there's kind of like maybe three different, we always find new things that we probably need to document a little bit better. It's the trick of documentation, right? And one is, just better documentation for like what it means to be a delegate, like what are the responsibilities and terms and that kind of stuff, which is really, I think, more to the heart of what issue 173 is about. But then additionally, I think it's some of the guidance or the recommendation or the, strong encouragement on the standards working group part to have projects identify a way through which they're coming to consensus on a standards topic, documenting that, and then ideally sharing it with the standards working group as a heads up. This is a thing that we're working on, and we can help amplify that. That can be part of what we do. So there's sort of like that function.
And engagement guidelines for projects in standards, is that something that's also worth considering?
I think it might be. I think there's in practicality, just, and this is anecdotal, I haven't, we don't have data on this at the moment, but maybe we should. It's like, it seems like our impact projects at OpenJS are more likely to have something or several somethings which intersects with the standard or set of standards in some way. And so, it feels like it's either the big impact projects or a small purpose-built kind of project that's likely to have some reason to be engaging with a standards org on a regular basis. And what does that mean? What does that look like if they want to engage with a group that we don't work with yet, right? So OpenJS is affiliated with W3C, with ECMA, with the Unicode Consortium, and with the OSI. So if there's others, what would that look like? What guidance would we put out to the projects? It's a good question.
I guess at the very least, having a clear consensus process will naturally bring in engagement from those who are looking to go through consensus discussions. So that's, that maybe would have helped in this situation if there was a standard consensus process protocol that they could, or at least steps, or that would have led them to this meeting or other things. Yeah, it seems to me like those two things should work.
I think another thing that's interesting in this case, Guy, is that you became an OpenJS delegate initially because there was some specific proposal that you were championing and working on, and you did that and were able to do that with us because you're a very active member and contributor to the Node project. And so it's like on that basis, we're saying, yes, Guy is an OpenJS delegate from the Node community who's going to work on X. But you were sort of exempted from this other conversation, which was not necessarily your proposal. And so, what kind of guidance can we give to the projects if they're going to start engaging with standards? Should Antoine, for example, have been sort of created an OpenJS delegate so that we could kind of close that loop and not have it look like somebody who's not an OpenJS delegate is yet weighing in to TC39 with an OpenJS project position is a little bit.
That's a good point, and it's like, and that's certainly a very good context question, because you don't want to have to build up context with an OpenJS delegate who's not aware of the situation, just to be able to. But I mean, if you're going up the organizational stack to get some kind of consensus, then I guess that's just something that you do sign up for. But in this case, that's actually not the case, because I work mostly on module specs and have been quite involved in the assertions discussions, and attending all the meetings and involved in all the meetings on that. So I have more context than most Node.js members, and could have helped them with some of those things as well. But yeah, then that also gets to the discussion of like terms and how that all plays out. So I sort of see personally that like there's a bunch of modules related stuff that's going to affect things like unit testing and mocking and virtualization in Node, and all of that's going to be coming down the pipeline, and there's going to be a process of shepherding all that work into Node.js now. So I'm still relatively on top of those standards, but at a point where I was not actively involved in those standards, certainly I wouldn't expect to be sticking around for other stuff. So I see it as part of this, what we've described at TC39 as like a modules epic, but there's a lot of things for modules coming down the pipeline, and that's very much been my focus, but it's difficult to more formally define that. And so that's also where, if I'm representing the OpenJS Foundation, it's difficult to say, you know, on what terms that representation is being made, even if informally there is a clearer understanding of that. So that I don't know how to approach either, and how we can formalize that. But hopefully there are ways to start having those discussions, and I'm happy to be involved in those discussions. It seems useful to work out.
I think that would be great. And I also want to make sure that we're not, well, there's a so internally I'm thinking about how, and I've been to some of these meetings where like even within like the Google team, which Google has many folks who participate, for example, by way of example, other large companies have also lots of others, and there's not necessarily internal consensus at those larger companies on these positions. And so I don't want to hold ourselves to a kind of a different set of expectations than the group has of those other partners. You know, if that's something that they want to, by they I mean the TC chairs want to start to really help member companies figure out, then I'm on board. But if that's not a priority for the TC, I wouldn't want to force that issue on us too soon until they, you know, tell everybody's. I don't know if that seems fair. I hope that's fair.
Sorry, yeah, I guess there's maybe like yeah, and it is a difficult situation at the moment because I want to be helping with this module stuff. And I recently got a different full-time position at Fastly, and that's not involved with this TC39 contribution stuff. And then I'm still trying to participate. And, you know, it's always an option for me to just no longer participate as a delegate, but just as an invited expert and maintain, you know, involvement in the standards discussions and communication with those who are delegates if there are difficult situations where we need to be able to come up with positions and maintain those positions. So yeah, I mean, that's certainly also part of the conversation. But at the bare minimum, as maintaining like being a delegate, it would help to have like some kind of basic set of roles and responsibilities or recognition of that, so that it's not something that can be you know, put in a position where there's questions about how that involvement is happening. And I think that's the biggest risk is, you know, if it's not clear and then people asking questions and they start to doubt your participation, not that anyone is, but that like I'm preemptively going to people and saying like, you know, I'm working at this company, but I'm still representing the OpenJS Foundation. Like, well, is that right? Well, I'm like, well, these are the arguments either way. And yeah, so that's a difficult one as well. And that's where clarity is difficult. And I think a lot of OpenJS Foundation members will work for other companies. It's not like one's, you know, a consultant or unemployed or whatever. So that does get to this kind of standards question of like, if the standards body wants you to be participating through the company, which is your major employer, because they want that membership tier payment.
I mean, I've had these conflicts before, and usually what I just do is state my, like, I pretend I'm different people. I'm just like, well, wearing my hat as an OpenJS with a delegate, not, I'm actually not an OpenJS delegate, but like I would say something like that. And then I would say, here would be the position I would be advancing. But if I take that hat off, and I'm just myself. Here's my position. And like, there's nothing wrong with doing that and like being clear about it, right? The issue, it's not that we want to silence dissent from an OpenJS position. It's that we want to make sure that the OpenJS position is clear, right? And I see people doing that all the time. Like someone will be like, I work for Google and Google's position is X, but my position is Y. And nobody has any issue with that. I've never, I guess I can't speak. I said Google is a, arbitrary, example. An individual company may have a problem with that, but it hasn't seemed like anyone really has. And I've done it all the time. So it's certainly not easy to shuffle around the virtual roles that you're representing in your head, but as long as you're clear about it, I feel like it's okay.
Yeah,
I
I
mean-
mean, it seems, sorry.
No, go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, it seems to me that this is like the obvious way to go. Everybody that has been around for a while has many different hats, and as long as we are clear about which hat is on, who we are expressing, like we do this in the tag as well all the time. Like sometimes we want to express our personal opinion about something and we haven't discussed it with the rest of the group. We just don't speak as if we're expressing tag consensus. We say this is just my personal opinion, or we say this is tag consensus. We've discussed it with the rest of the group, or like sometimes we might say things like, I'm saying this with my CSS working group hat on, and that sort of thing. Like this seems no different to me from that.
I think the one way that and why I would agree that there's maybe some benefit in documenting this is when you're looking at membership in a trade group and a membership in a standards body, that's done for IP reasons, right? And so, we just ideally, our delegates are members of companies that are also members of, TC39, for example. And so any contribution that they might make in that space would either be covered because A, their membership with their company covers, a contribution, or B, they are representing an open source project code produced under an open license that they can speak to because all of that has been contributed openly elsewhere. In the case of, hey, I'm a delegate of OpenJS because I represent the Electron project, but my company isn't a member of TC39, they're going to just have to be very clear that they're representing the Electron point of view and not the non-member company point of view, nor should they indicate in any way, shape, or form that they are representing the point of view of OpenJS member organizations, right? Like Guy couldn't go and say, well, the following 10 companies are members of OpenJS Foundation, so I'm representing, them here too. That's not what we're doing. It's the project's perspective, the project's needs, use cases, concerns, whatever related to the spec, and nothing else. And that, I think, being very clear on that point hopefully should assuage any concern that the TC might have, because they otherwise have means through which they can invite people from non-member organizations as an invited expert to come weigh in on X, Y, or Z because, their company isn't a member, but they've got something important to say.
Yeah, I'm happy to help work through however I can contribute to the process here. If it, especially if it buys me another 6 to 12 months, as it were, of being able to represent in this capacity and continue to work on this stuff, which is very much outside of my role. There's crossover with the work I'm doing in my company, but it's not direct. It's kind of these use cases are all for themselves, and of course there are lots of cross effects, but it's primarily JS specific work, that's JS specific features that I'm sort of trying my best to carve out time for away from my job. Yeah, I'm happy to follow up with you.
I mean, I feel like as long as whoever Fastly is like chief TC39 person is, like whoever the company's decided is handling that stuff, as long as they're cool with you doing it, seems fine, right? Like I mean, the vast majority of the stuff I worked on at Airbnb and Coinbase wasn't.
TC39 members. So yeah, they're not TC39, and they have no
okay.
plans to show TC39.
Then yeah, I mean, in that case, the only concern I think ECMA leadership would have is that you're not somehow advancing Fastly's interests without them paying their fees. But since it isn't Fastly related, like I think there is not going to be a concern there, and I don't think there's going to be any confusion on TC39 that that's what's going on.
But yeah, I guess having clarity can help get these definitions clear, because there are a bunch of gray areas where it's like, it's not, I don't like being in a bunch of gray areas. It's so yeah, it's helpful to, I mean, if there's ways to come up with some things that can do this more generally while keeping the process accessible, I think that's can be a win-win in this situation. So.
So I'm going to wrap up this topic for today because Darcy's added a great question to the notes doc that I want to at least start to address here. And I think we've got some good action items as a result of this conversation today. So unless there's any final thoughts, we can close this topic, and I'm going to update the current issue and add a new issue for documentation needs here on issue 173. Any other parting thoughts, and we'll go to Darcy's? Cool. Super dope. All right, Darcy, hand it over to you.
Cool. I apologize if it's loud. I'm in a coffee shop here. I quickly wanted to just bring up, and I don't know if this is the right venue to do this, but wondering if there's, any resources that the OpenJSF has, or obviously the connections that you mentioned, Jory, with ECMA that we could use, even maybe Guy, your existing relationship, or join your existing relationship with TC39 would be helpful here. But essentially in the past year, after having managed the NPM CLI for 3-4 years, we noticed that Semver, as a package in the ecosystem, just dwarfs almost every other package in terms of usage, not just as a dependent package, but actually from independent project usage as well. And I was wondering if there was a way forward in terms of standardization of Semver in the runtime or in the web API, and getting some comparator functions into the web API or runtime, which might actually be sort of, I think, aligned with like the module story, right? Like, especially with Guy's work, I think that there's opportunity here for us to have a consistent understanding of what Semver strings look like across runtimes, across the browsers. I think that it would be amazing if we all were using the same functions across those. I understand that the Node Semver, or the Semver package that exists today, does have some nuance in terms of range comparators, and so the note here, or the caveat here, would be that we could start off with writing a spec that just aligns with the existing 2.00 Semver spec that exists, and sort of delineating what a major minor patch and sort of pre-release syntax looks like, and then comparison for that. And those nuances could be, again, left to maybe user land or the ecosystem to help delineate. But yeah, I want to bring this to this group, just in case that there's any interest in this as well. I think it would be a huge opportunity and a big win. I look at December similar to date strings, right? Like, if we had a consistent way of knowing how to parse these strings, I think there might be some interesting opportunities for browser and server sort of JavaScript to be speaking the same language. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, so I think the case for Node to ship a Semver API is pretty ironclad. I think
it already does. Right.
Well, I mean, but to ship an exposed one, right? Like, I know it's bundled in, but like the case for Node to expose it is pretty solid. you could expand that to go to winter CG and say, let's have, you know, browser compliant server runtimes use this. Although there may be some pushback there because browsers don't have the functionality. If you wanted it to go in the web or in the language, it would need to have, like, you have an immediate, like, you could just point at download numbers and like everyone's like, yes, on the server, you have to have Semver. But I think one would need examples of Semver interaction in the browser, like that are probably more complex than like, is this version number, right? Like, for, you know, and if you had that, then I think you'd have a compelling case to add it to perhaps the language. And as far as ranges, there's actually an open PR to add ranges to the real Semver spec by Isaac. So like, I think it's totally reasonable to do the chunk and then, you know, add as ranges become standard, hopefully they will, then like expand to that. But as far as the venue, I mean, I think this is as good as any to have these discussions and figure out what direction to take it.
One thing, so I was just clicking over to the existing Semver spec and just like seeing what it is. What I notice is, you know, it's a spec being managed on GitHub, very common now. Not using what we would really think of as a spec license, and so that kind of makes it maybe a little bit weirder to pull in. So one thing that we could do is help Node create what we call a community specification licensed project, which does give the effort a spec compatible license that could then be consumed by W3C, TC, or community group or whatever, or ECMA TC, or wherever it wants to be when it grows up, as I like to say. But at least it gets a proper, you know, ANSI based, you know, due process, proper license kind of format going for it to kind of be able to advance to whichever form it might want to go later. So that's a pretty good option, I think, and actually exactly why we created community spec, or why several lawyers who are not me created community spec, because I'm also not a lawyer.
Is there a reason that you want to go straight to a specification as opposed to it being something like a Node.js built in, or is it in particular because you're looking to have it available in more JS environments?
Sorry, can you say that one more time, Guy?
You're a little quiet, Guy.
Oh, okay. Is there a reason it's you want to do it as a direct specification as opposed to something that exists in Node.js as a core module or something like that?
Yeah, so one, that's super easy to do, like getting it probably into the Node runtime, that's not hard. The problem and maybe concern that we would have is that as Jordan mentioned, like the implementation that we have today, the canonical implementation, at least in the Node ecosystem, deviates from the spec that we see. And actually most ecosystems deviate a little bit. The range comparators deviate a bit. So we'd actually have to create probably like a subset version of this module anyways, if we wanted to ever have like a canonical understanding. So like the reason why I want to go to the standards route is so that we lay the groundwork for like a common understanding. And going back to Jordan's, you know, what are the use cases? We are starting to see more and more versions in URIs. Like you see this all the time. Blog posts, any kind of asset has versioning in URL. So if you're talking about the use cases for browser implementations, this is, you know, I can give a ton of references, even with ES modules, right? There's use cases there. So I think it would be good to have like common understanding, but yeah.
That's great.
So I'm just we're at time, and then we have to give this account over to the CPC working group. But Darcy, are you able to come in 2 weeks? Can we pick this up again? Okay, cool. And then I'll send you a link to the community spec stuff, and then you can check it out. All right, thanks everyone for coming. I'll upload this to YouTube shortly, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.